This is probably one of the most powerful and obnoxious fragrances in my collection, and I absolutely love it. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel, today we're talking fragrances, and this is a practical review of Etat Libre d'Orange Rien Intense Incense. These reviews are for fragrances that I have a lot of experience with, multiple wears in many situations, and are meant to give you a general idea of what it feels to wear the fragrance. As per usual, I do a lot of research before buying fragrances, but I don't really like to go into details about notes and accords as long as they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. I have to admit that the French house of Etat Libre d'Orange is not really a brand that I'm super familiar with. This one here was actually my first fragrance from the brand. I got this about 9 months ago in a trade, and upon initially spraying this and smelling this, I was completely blown away, mainly by the sheer power, presence, and just volume of this thing. This is a very imposing fragrance. It's one of the most loud, potent fragrances in my collection still to this day, and this includes beasts like Amouage Interlude. It includes other really potent stuff that I've talked about in the past. This is probably one of the strongest fragrances that I own. Etat Libre d'Orange is a very strange house. They're very provocative in a very intelligent, very clever type of way. A lot of their fragrances are known to be kind of stinky and to be a little bit abstract. I think that their most popular fragrance is Sécrétion Magnifique, the fragrance that is supposed to be smelling like bodily fluids and just bodily excretions in the most foul possible way, horrible. I have never smelled that. I definitely have to remedy this. I'm really curious, even just to see if it lives up to the hype and just the smelliness of it. It might be one of those cases, kind of like Sadonaso, where the marketing does a huge part in the presentation. In any case, I do feel that the house of Etat Libre d'Orange is very cleverly edgy. I currently own Ghost in the Shell that I already featured on this channel a couple times. I also own the new version of Tom of Finland. I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's something suede, maybe clean suede. That's a very new addition. I still have to get my nose on it properly and to really give it a lot of wear so you understand what's going on. And then I own this one here, Rien Intense. I have to fully admit that despite wearing this a lot and giving it a lot of wears, I really haven't researched much about it. I kind of left it at that as a very powerful thing. And when I decided to finally research the fragrance to really confirm my thoughts and to put it into a review form, I sort of discovered that this is actually a flanker to another fragrance by Etat Libre d'Orange, perfumed by none other than Antoine Lee, which is actually one of my new favorite perfumers because he basically perfumed the whole of Les Indemodables range, except for the old ones. Anyway, the old fragrance that this is inspired to, or it's a flanker to, is called Rien, and that came out in 2006. This one here came out almost a decade later in 2014. I'm not really sure who perfumed this or what the idea and concept behind this was or where it sparked from. But going back to the original Rien, it appears that that fragrance was supposed to be sort of a molecule type scent. It's apparently reminiscent of this in some ways, but this is so far from a molecule type scent that I just can't put the puzzle pieces together. I don't really know what the idea was. So unless the original Rien is significantly, and I mean significantly lighter than this, I just don't see it happening. And by the way, Rien means nothing in French. In this case specifically, I have no idea what the name is referencing because this is very much far from being nothing. This is one of the most powerful, dense, and just overwhelming fragrances that I own. It's powerful and jarring to such an extreme degree that this almost comes across as violent. And the violence aspect of this is actually the characteristic that I'll leverage to really showcase my options later down the road, so stay tuned for that. To be fair, the full name of this fragrance is Rien Intense Incense, and the intensity is definitely there. Now, this is not your typical incense fragrance. I am an incense junkie, as you may know, and a lot of the fragrances that are in the market have this very relaxing, very zen, very meditative type of aspect. This is far from that. This is not really an incense fragrance per se. I mean, it might have some characteristics of incense, namely the smoke factor, but I wouldn't really categorize it as such. This is a very modern interpretation of incense. Another interesting thing about this fragrance is that this is often regarded as a masculine powerhouse, almost resembling the very strong fragrances from the 80s. I don't think this is masculine at all. I actually think that this is super unisex. It's a very abstract rendition of power and violence. And that violent aspect that I've been speaking about is actually one of the strongest characteristics of the wear experience. But we're going to talk about that and the scent profile after we cover the presentation. Presentation-wise, the House of Etat Libre d'Orange is actually quite iconic. They all feature a variant on the same sort of concept. They all have this target on the corner of the fragrance bottle. The fragrance bottle itself is this very beautiful or very unique looking bottle. It's basically a squared off bottle with one of the sides kind of cut off, and there's the logo here, Etat Libre d'Orange, basically embossed in the glass. Really, really nice. The bottle feels hefty, it feels weighty, it feels really well made. This is a 100 ml bottle. I'm not really sure if this one comes in 50 ml. A lot of the fragrances do come in 50 ml bottles. My other two bottles, which include the Ghost in the Shell, are actually 50 mls. I appreciate 50 mls a little bit more. I'm a little bit overwhelmed by 100 mls, especially when it's such a powerful fragrance like this. I'll never get through this. The bottle itself is super well made. The labeling is a giant sticker that's very firmly stuck on. High quality stuff. This bottle specifically features this black lacquered finish. You can't see through it. You don't really know what the liquid content is, and that's a little bit of a bummer. The bottle itself is pretty fingerprint prone, which is not something that I love. The cap is a metal cap, very heavy. It has a nice embossing on the top. It has a plastic insert which clicks firmly into place on the atomizer. The atomizer assembly is actually pretty good. It sprays a ton of liquid, it's semi-pressurized, and it's easy to aim. It's really a joy to use. I'll be spraying once on my arm because I've been wearing this scent as my fragrance of the day, and it's super, super powerful. I just don't want to restart the whole process because this will last me easily down into the morning tomorrow. So I want to keep it easy. Let's give it one spray here. Yeah, it sprays a crap ton of liquid. This is absolutely insane. It's like a fire hose. By the way, I said that I've been wearing this as my fragrance of the day. And at work, it's been a little bit challenging. I've got a lot of weird looks. This is a very imposing, very loud, very insanely overpowering and overwhelming type of fragrance. But we're going to talk about that later. The overall presentation for Etat Libre d'Orange is a really high point for the brand. They have this really clever type of undertone that I really like. The boxes these come in are super simple, very, very plain looking. Even for a relatively premium fragrance like this, the box is exceedingly simple. It's just a very thin cardboard, basically disposable. In a way, I do applaud that because it doesn't really incentivize to keep the box. On the flip side, it feels a little bit cheap. It feels like a little bit of a cost-cutting measure. Price-wise, I'm not really sure where this one stands. I think that this, again, as I mentioned, is part of the premium line. They have a line which is even more premium than this, which includes the fragrances that have like a golden badge or something like that. A lot of the older fragrances, a lot of the OG fragrances like Fat Electrician, like the original Rien, like Remarkable People, or You or Someone Like You, they're all very clever names, by the way. I think that those run cheaper. You can easily find those at discounters for about 50 to 60 bucks for 50 mls and about 90 bucks for 100 mls. This one, I haven't really seen at discounters recently, so I don't really know how much this runs. But overall, Etat Libre d'Orange is a very fairly priced fragrance house, especially for how unique and how clever and how artistic they are. Super cool stuff. I feel that Etat Libre d'Orange in general is a great entry point to niche fragrances. Okay, time to talk about the scent profile and wear experience for Rien Intense Incense. What does this actually smell like? Accurately describing what this fragrance smells like will prove to be quite difficult just because of how potent this thing is. And I know it sounds like a cop-out, but actually, when you spray this, you're so overwhelmed that your judgment is clouded. You really can't make sense of what you're smelling. It's just so powerful. And it's powerful to a violent degree, as I mentioned before. Now, let's go back to this violence aspect. When I say violence, I don't mean it in a typical gruesome or physically violent type of way. This is more violent like a flashbang, like a police flashbang or like a military flashbang. If you know what a flashbang is, it's basically this explosive device that is designed to stun you and to disorient you. And this smells exactly like what a flashbang would feel like. This has such a powerful opening that completely stuns you out of your senses. It completely takes away your ability to reason and to understand what this is. Initial blast really comes across as a super strong rose, very animalic, very leathery type of thing. It all comes across as a giant cloud of scent, almost like a toxic fume. It's so potent, it's so piercing. This is a very loud, very overwhelming fragrance, and it's animalic in that sort of violent way, in that very oppressive sort of way. It doesn't smell poopy or like sewer like many people say. It has a little bit of an underlying pissy component, like an ammonia sweat component, but overall within the scent profile itself, it completely dissipates and it's just flooded by the rest of the stuff. This comes across as a little bit of a rosy incense scent. Again, it's a rosy smoke, but it's a very modern take on that concept. This kind of smells like being in a very crowded, very loud, very oppressive type of venue where there's a modern EDM concert playing and you're the only person that's sober. People are bumping into you, people are stepping on your toes, everyone is yelling, and you're completely overwhelmed by the smoke from the smoke machine, everyone's perfume that is mixed a little bit with their sweat because they're dancing, and there's this super loud music and super duper loud bass which is rattling your bones and almost giving you like a permanent tinnitus. And the flashbang analogy that I was referring to before also comes into play again because it's so freaking loud that you can barely hear yourself. You find yourself screaming just to have some sort of a presence over this insanely loud environment. It's really anxiety inducing as I described it, and actually I'm very familiar to that feeling. I've been to various EDM concerts and I've never been high on anything, so it was a little bit of a fatiguing experience. I love electronic music. I never resented going there. I never regretted it, but it's something that I need days to recover from, and this smells exactly like that. It has that sort of a violent crowd pushing you around. It has that sort of insane energy to it. This perfectly replicates the idea of riding that chaotic wave of people that is so energetic that the air is almost electrified. It's almost static to a point. All right, let's just pause that image for a sec. Let's go back to the scent profile and let me try to explain where I'm getting all these images. So as I said, this opens insanely loud. What you get first is this rose, smoky, leathery, animalic sort of thing. The other very big part of this fragrance is the huge aldehydic component to it. It smells clean, it smells soapy, which is a massive contrast with this, again, this smoky, leathery, sweaty sort of feeling. It smells like someone has been spraying massive doses of perfume over this insanely stinky animalic base, and that is kind of giving me the image of the crowd, which is wearing a ton of perfume, but it's also sweating and kind of like dancing all together, bumping into each other. And this overwhelming, seemingly chaotic blast of an opening is what makes this fragrance very much unwearable for a lot of the people. If you get past the opening, or if you're even seduced by it like I was in the beginning, you really start appreciating the scent and you're actually really mesmerized by the power and the intensity behind this. It's insane. It's like a nuclear bomb. The interesting part about the scent is how this transitions massively top to bottom. The wear experience for this fragrance is basically divided into two parts. You have this insanely loud, nuclear, massively projecting opening that's very animalic and very intense. And then you have the dry down, which is a very quiet, very polite, very elegant and refined, almost to a relaxing degree type of wear experience or type of a scent profile. And everything in between is a transition from that super intense opening to this mild and relaxed dry down. It's a really trippy thing and it's almost a necessity. And without this cutoff or timeout from this insanely nuclear opening, this fragrance would be completely unwearable for more than 2 to 3 hours. It would be so insanely fatiguing, even for someone like me that likes really intense scents. Back to the smells that I get from this fragrance. I said rose, I said leather, I said a little bit of a smoky incense component, a little bit of an animalic edge. Everything is just mashed together in this nuclear bomb of a fragrance. Now, I really want to underline how this smells modern. It doesn't really smell like your typical incense fragrance whatsoever. Not only because of the power, but also because of the vibe. There's a lot of sweetness in here. And the sweetness just elevates the scent profile to the next level. It really turns up the volume to 11. The sweet notes in here really connect and combine with the smoky incense to give you this very modern smoke machine type of feeling. It's a very dense, very heavy fragrance, but surprisingly, it doesn't really sit in the base of the tonal range. It's actually quite elevated. This might be due to those aldehydic soapy notes that really clean everything up. They really push the fragrance up. Something that Ramsey said in one of his reviews really stuck to me, and it wasn't a review for this fragrance. It was a review for Zoologist Sacred Scarab. In that video, he said that the aldehydic components in that fragrance tend to put you in a state of confusion and they really stun you. And the same sort of thing happens with this fragrance. These aldehydic components are just so weird and so off-putting and so powerful that they just stun you like, again, like a flashbang. The violent nature of this that I keep referring to is just so unescapable. And I really want to underline that, again, the violent aspect here has nothing to do with physical violence. It has nothing to do with blood, guts, or gore. There's nothing physical about this. The violence that I'm talking about in here is more about the sensory assault that this fragrance gives you. It's such a unique experience, and I have almost nothing that smells exactly like this. I could probably talk about the scent profile for Rien Intense Incense for a very long time, going into the fine nuances of the wear experience. But I really want to cut this a little bit shorter and talk about the practicalities. When it comes to performance, Rien Intense is absolutely nuclear. It's super long lasting. This fragrance lasts easily 12 hours plus. If you spray it in the evening and go out clubbing, this will last you until the next morning easily. The initial projection is also absolutely insane. It's incredibly loud for the first 2 to 3 hours after initially spraying. The scent really never transitions to a skin scent. It always just sits there and just keeps on pumping out of your skin. It keeps on pumping and radiating off your skin. The performance is so massive that I almost deem it as a negative. I rarely wear this scent just because it's so long lasting. It's such a massive commitment. I'm not really in the mood to smell the thing all day, every day. If this would last a little bit less, I'd probably enjoy it much more and I'd probably be using it a lot more. When it comes to versatility in use cases, you already know what I'm about to say. The extreme power of this fragrance makes it really not conducive to day-to-day activities or to office work or to anything like that. This is basically a very loud event type of scent. This would probably be a killer clubbing scent. Nothing else that I smelled is as powerful, nothing else is as loud, and just overall as oppressing. You would definitely be noticed wearing this, for better or for worse. I don't think it smells bad at all. I actually think it smells pretty good. In the air especially, it's just super powered, and it comes across as a mixture of clean and just spicy and very deep and dark. Really interesting stuff. Again, not versatile at all. This would be a very recognizable scent. I would only reserve it to very special occasions or to solitary wears. I can't even think about any realistic situations where I personally would wear this. I don't go to clubs anymore. I've never really gone to clubs. I'm too old for that. This is more of a special effect type fragrance. To me, this is a statement piece. This is a statement of what fragrance is capable of. It's really cool, and I do applaud it for that. When it comes to demographics, I feel that this is insanely unisex. Some people say that it's masculine, maybe because of the power and because of the slight animalic notes in here. I think that it's so abstract that it really transcends any sort of gender. Even age-wise, this is really for anyone and no one. Anyone that really wants to stand out could easily pull this off. This has no facet of elegance, it has no facet of subtlety. So you really have to be into loud fragrance. And if you're into that sort of thing, and if you're vaguely into the notes that this features, this might be exactly a fragrance for you, no matter how old you are. When it comes to imagery, narration, and storytelling, I'm not really getting much from this. Again, it puts you in a state of confusion. It really is puzzling. I don't get anything that is remotely narrative or storytelling about this. At the same time, this is also not a very perfumey, very smell good type of fragrance. I don't really know what this is and what this is for. I would be super curious to learn a little bit more about the thought process that went behind the scent and its creation, the concept. I also would like to know a little bit more about the name of this fragrance and why they decided to make it a flanker of Rien and why they called it Rien. Really interesting stuff, and I feel that Etat Libre d'Orange doesn't really do stuff casually or randomly, so there has to be some sort of a explanation. If you know anything about the scent, meaning-wise, just please leave a comment down below and explain it. I'm really curious. Okay, we're at the part of the video where I give you some options for my reviewed fragrance. In the case of the Rien Intense Incense, I didn't really know what to leverage, and as I mentioned before, I decided to go for the violence aspect. the sensory overload type of aspect. And my first fragrance that I want to showcase is one that I've talked about relatively recently. It's called Just by Franck Boclet. Franck Boclet is a weird house. He really designs fragrances that are absolutely nuclear and just overpowering on every aspect. And Just is one of those weird fragrances that kind of alternates a punch to a kiss. On some aspects, it's super elegant and really, really refined. On some others, it's just completely over the top and absolutely nuclear with its animalic components. This kind of smells like Amouage Goldman to a degree. I already talked about this in my other feature. It has a very strong, very elegant type of floral component, which is offset by this very animalic civet, very pissy, very ammonia-filled civet note. It's a very strong masculine fragrance that comes across as a little bit douchey in a way. This kind of smells like an entrepreneur that is fat and overweight. He's a little bit greasy, and he's the kind of guy that goes to the bathroom, doesn't wash his hands after using it. I don't know why I get this image. This is such a loud, obnoxious fragrance. It's so incredibly potent that I can totally see people telling me not to wear this after they smell this on me. If you want to pull this off, you have to definitely go easy on the sprays. Otherwise, you're going to be completely overwhelming to everyone around you. It's a really interesting fragrance. I really like the overall feel. It has a spicy component, which is also super powered. This is such a wild ride. I really like Franck Boclet fragrances. This is pretty much one of the best examples in the brand. I've smelled 4 to 5. They're all absolutely nuclear. Just is part of the Just Married collection. It's such a cool concept, and I'm really eager and curious to smell Married as well, the feminine version of this apparently. Super cool stuff. Be sure to check out Franck Boclet's offerings if you're into powerful nuclear fragrances. The second fragrance that I decided to feature is none other than T-Rex by Zoologist. This one here is also very violent in its opening, super loud, really, really oppressing. In a similar way to Rien Intense Incense, this one also has a massive transition top to bottom. It opens up with this roaring, overpowering barbecue smoke type of smell. It smells like the whole forest is on fire. Very, very bitter, very smoky, but it quickly dissipates and it leaves room to these really beautiful florals, and then it ultimately dries down to a very interesting animalic type of leather. It's a trip in its own, really, really interesting. It's a very abstract concept that maybe is meant to depict a day in life of a dinosaur, from the meteor to the lava to the insanely lush flowery forests to the very rugged, stinky, leathery skin of a dinosaur. I don't know, I'm just assuming. It's super creative. I really like the House of Zoologists. I really like their idea and execution. They have such a charming approach to fragrances. I just can't help but support them. They're so awesome. Get yourself a sample kit of Zoologists. These are such fun fragrances to sample, especially if you're with company that appreciates this sort of thing. You get laughs, you get a lot of creative input. It's just such a great time. I really recommend Zoologist. I love the brand and I'll always support them, as I said. The last fragrance that I decided to showcase is a little bit different. This is a very powerful, almost to an overwhelming degree, gourmand fragrance. We're talking about Follow by Kerosene. This is an insanely strong coffee-based fragrance. Do not mistake this for the other very similarly named fragrance from the same brand called Followed. That one there is more of a cappuccino type of fragrance. There's a lot of syrupy sweetness to that, a lot of caramel. That I don't really like. It's a little bit too over the top. This one here is much more coffee forward in a very beautiful and realistic coffee rendition at that. It's very bitter, it's very direct. It has a very toasted, very smoky type of aspect. It's actually quite beautiful. I'm not a coffee drinker myself, but I really do like the aroma of coffee. This is a very dark, very black style of coffee. No sweetness in here. It's super potent. It's super long lasting. You spray this on skin, it basically overwhelms you for the rest of the day. In some ways, it's really energetic because again, maybe it resembles the aroma of coffee. It kind of wakes you up. On the other side though, it's a little bit overwhelming and super fatiguing just because it never cuts off. It never really transitions. This is a very simple fragrance at heart. It's just a coffee fragrance. Super powered, really, really in your face, very violent in a way. And violent in this case might be actually a good thing because as I said, it might kickstart your day. It might give you a lot of energy. It's borderline unwearable for me. I really do enjoy wearing this at home, especially if I'm sitting at home in the evening. but it's an insanely fatiguing, long-lasting scent that I would not recommend for day-to-day use, especially for office work. Unless you work in a very quirky environment that is very accepting of weird scents and attire, then this could be even your signature scent. If you like coffee, you really have to check this out because no other fragrance that I've tried, which is coffee-based, has such a realistic rendition of the pure coffee aspect. Really, really interesting stuff. I like the house of Kerosene. I like indie brands like this, and I'll fully support them. All right, back to Etat Libre d'Orange, Rien Intense Incense for my final recommendations and overview. Now, the house of Etat Libre d'Orange, first and foremost, is super cool. I really like the house. They're clever, they're intelligent, they're well priced. They're the perfect entry level to true niche perfumery with an artistic twist. So for that alone, they get really high marks. Now, this fragrance is a little bit particular. It's quite inaccessible. I would not recommend this to the average Joe. If you're into nuclear fragrances, you can give this a try. Do not blind buy this because it's such a powerful, overwhelming type of experience. You might end up never wearing it. And that is coming from a person which really loves intense, overwhelming fragrances. I don't wear this enough. I would like to wear this a little bit more. I just can't commit to the full day wear experience that this offers. I like this a lot. It's really interesting, but to me, ultimately, it's more of an exercise in fragrance making. And Etat Libre d'Orange is known for that sort of thing. They're very edgy, they're very thought-provoking. They have a very ironic take on perfumery that I enjoy personally. And most of their products actually are kind of designed to be daily wears and acceptable. But some of them, like this one here, like Sécrétion Magnifique, are just a little bit too over the top, and they're more like experiences. They're statement pieces for the brand. Really cool stuff. I really do recommend sampling this at the very least, especially if you're into the language of perfumery and you really want to experience a different type of violence, a different type of modern, overwhelming approach. Once again, this is not for everyone, so buyers beware. But if you're feeling particularly brave, if you're up for a challenge, this one here will be waiting for you in their collection. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It always helps the channel and it's massively appreciated. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. As per usual, many more videos to come, many more formats to cover. See you in the next one, and cheers.